A familiar face or two make their return to the Xcel Energy Center tonight as the Minnesota Wild take on the Los Angeles Kings. We take a look at tonight's game as well as some keys to a Minnesota Wild win on today's pregame preview edition of Locked on Wild.
You're Locked on Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, this is Brandon Duham, and this is Locked on Wild.
And welcome into a special pregame preview edition of Locked on Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you, as always, for making Locked on Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss out on any of our new episodes throughout the course of the week. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. On today's episode of Locked on Wild, we preview tonight's matchup against the Los Angeles Kings. We'll look at some keys for the Minnesota Wild. We'll discuss the lineup and who we will see in net, plus some familiar faces make their return to the Xcel Energy Center here tonight. My name is Seth Topol, your daily Minnesota Wild insider, and we are here at the Xcel Energy Center getting set to take in warm-ups for tonight's matchup between the Wild and the Kings. And a lot made over the last couple of days about the roster moves made by the Minnesota Wild. Alex Goligoski on injured reserve. Sammy Walker also called up. So let's just get to the lineup here tonight for starters. Sammy Walker will slot in to Matt Boldy's spot on the second line with Joel Eriksson Ek and Marcus Johansson. So that's the pretty easy piece of the puzzle that we get with Walker being able to be recalled. Would imagine we'll see that same pairing of John Merrill and Dakota Mermis here tonight. And we will also see Marc-Andre Fleury in nets. The Wild's going with the hot hand in Marc-Andre Fleury after his performance against the Montreal Canadiens. So we will see Fleury get a second consecutive start here at the X against the Los Angeles Kings. The Wild's coming off of a win against Montreal in which they scored 5 special teams goals, 2 shorthanded and 3 power play goals as well. That always helps when you can get the special teams going, and the Wild certainly did that against the Canadiens. The Los Angeles Kings come into town having beaten the Winnipeg Jets 5-1 in their most recent win, and that will lead to what should be a fun matchup filled with a lot of firepower here in this one tonight. And oh yeah, no shortage of former Wild players on the other side of the aisle. Of course, you got the big one, Kevin Fiala, returning to the Xcel Energy Center after he was traded before last season for Brock Faber. Faber has been the earliest part of the return we've been able to see so far in that trade, and so far looks good from the Minnesota Wild side of the coin. But we also have Liam Ogren overseas, and so until he gets here and we get a chance to see what he's capable of, certainly lots of potential with Ogren across the pond. But until we see him here, then you can get a better sense as to how this trade went for the Minnesota Wild, for Kevin Fiala, who's been fantastic with the Kings throughout the course of his career. Although no goals yet here on the season, and I knocked just to make sure that I'm not going to jinx that, because that would be that'd be unfortunate heading into tonight's matchup. And of course, the goalie for the Los Angeles Kings, Cam Talbot, back in Minnesota after he was traded to Ottawa for Philip Gustafsson. That trade also looking very, very good for the Minnesota Wild. So a couple of trades that, at least at this point, it looks like have worked out pretty good for the Minnesota Wild. And we now get to see everybody in tow here tonight for what should be just a fun matchup. The Kings come in with a record of 1-1-1 And for Los Angeles, some early struggles for the Kings. Their first 2 games of the season, they lost to the Colorado Avalanche 5-2. They then lost to the Carolina Hurricanes 6-5 in a shootout. And so for the Kings, they're trying to get some better goaltending, trying to get back on track themselves in the early start of the season. But it's a Kings team that is full of stars. Anze Kopitar, Kevin Fiala. You've got Pierre-Luc Dubois now with the Los Angeles Kings. So that, of course, is another name to keep an eye on as we go throughout the night. But defensively, we've got Drew Doughty, who is very familiar with Kirill Kaprizov, and plenty of names on that Kings side of the equation. That should make this a fun matchup. It's a matchup that has been pretty back and forth over the last couple of years. Of course, we remember how Kirill Kaprizov welcomed himself to Drew Doughty by just basically skating all over the ice with him in desperate pursuit. So it'll be interesting to see because the last time these two teams played, Kaprizov ended up being escorted out of that matchup after taking some frustration from some hits earlier in the game. So a lot going to be on everybody's minds as we get started with this game here tonight. We have a lot to get to here in our pregame. We'll talk about keys to the game as well as some players who could potentially have a big impact in this one. All that coming up as we continue today's special pregame preview edition of Locked on Wilds after this. Today's episode of Locked on Wild is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there is no better time to get in on the action. The Minnesota Vikings taking on the San Francisco 49ers on Monday Night Football. Plenty of player props that you can take advantage of, from Kirk Cousins to Jordan Addison to TJ Hawkinson. Plenty of firepower on the Minnesota Vikings side of the aisle. But don't forget about San Francisco as well. They've got George Kittle. They've got potentially Christian McCaffrey. Lots of different options for your player props, as well as taking advantage of the spread, which right now sits with the 49ers as 7-point favorites. All that on an app that is amazingly easy to use. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Today's edition of Locked on Wild is also brought to you by Jase Medical. And there is a lot of uncertainty in the world these days, whether it be unrest in the Middle East, hurricane season getting set in Florida, plus earthquakes on the West Coast as well. These can all lead to supply chain shortages for medications or the inability to get medications in a timely manner. The solution is Jase Medical and the Jase Case. It's a personalized emergency medication kit that contains 5 essential antibiotics that treat the most common and deadly bacterial infections. And best of all, you can also customize your case and add additional life-saving medications based on your unique needs. Yes, you heard me right. You can customize your Jase Case to fit exactly what you need. If you're not sure about a family member and what sorts of medications they would like in theirs, you can give gift cards so that they can personalize their own Jase Case. Head to jasemedical.com and enter code LOCKEDON at checkout for a $20 discount on your order. Again, head to jasemedical.com, enter code LOCKEDON at checkout for a $20 discount on your order. That's promo code LOCKEDON at jasemedical.com. Welcome back to today's pregame preview edition of Locked on Wilds. Thank you for tuning in to Locked on Wild, and we remind you to make sure you stay tuned with us throughout the course of the game. We'll have intermission reports as well as a live postcast after the action is complete, regardless of how this game goes down, win or lose. Also, depending on how my laptop battery life is at that point in the game. Got all the way here and forgot my power cord at home. So we're in a fight for this matchup here today. So let's look at some keys to this matchup. And number one, this is going to be a real test for this Minnesota Wild defense. The Los Angeles Kings have plenty of firepower. And so where we weren't really sure, the defense did look good against Montreal, but it's the Montreal Canadiens. It's not really that big of a test, to be honest. So we get a really good sense as to where these new look D pairings are at by seeing how things go against the Los Angeles Kings here tonight. So that's the first key, because you want to see that defense be able to hold their own and to keep the net clean in front of Marc-Andre Fleury here tonight. And Fleury was good against Montreal, but the other thing that I think made that performance as good as it was the fact that the Minnesota Wild offense was able to control the action and prevent Fleury from having to face a ton of shots, especially early on. The Wild had a huge disparity in shots from the get-go. They were able to hang on to that throughout the course of the game, and before you know it, it was game over for the Wild. So defensively, this is going to be a real test. So for the Wild D, keep the net clean and hold down the fort against this Los Angeles Kings offense. Key number 2 is going to be the top 6 for the Minnesota Wild. We saw Kirill Kaprizov score against the Montreal Canadiens. We saw Matt Boldy score before he left the game. Actually, not Matt Boldy. Who am I thinking of? Joel Eriksson Ek. We saw Joel Eriksson Ek score a couple of goals as well. And so this top 6 tonight is going to need to be up to the challenge of trying to go toe-to-toe against the likes of Anze Kopitar, against the likes of Pierre-Luc Dubois, against the likes of Kevin Fiala. And so if they can handle the action here this evening against that top 6, that's going to go a long way to picking up a win here in this one. And the third key of the night, and I brought this up in the first segment, was the fact that the last time these two teams faced off, we saw Kirill Kaprizov exert some frustration on Drew Doughty. Can't have that here tonight. Got to just stick to the play on the ice and don't let the Kings go into that mode to then potentially end up taking a player like Kirill Kaprizov off the ice for large chunks of this game. So keep it on the ice. Defense, hold the fort down. And for the top 6, go toe-to-toe against the best that the Los Angeles Kings have to offer. All in all, if the Wild are able to do all of those, it should be a game that they come away with a win here tonight. And bonus, key number 4, is make sure to greet Mr. Talbot early and often in this one. We've seen this happen to the Wild in previous seasons, is that you have a goalie that may be shaky, albeit Talbot was very good against the Winnipeg Jets, but you just don't test them. They saw this happen when the Seattle Kraken had Martin Jones in net, and the Wild just did not get enough shots on to try to test those types of goalies to where you can tell, okay, he doesn't have it tonight, and then you end up being able to get a bunch of shots on net and picking up a couple of goals. So test the net on offense to try to see which Cam Talbot we're working with here in this one tonight. So those are your keys to the game. Again, stick with us throughout the course of tonight's matchup. We'll have intermission report content for you, as well as our live Locked On Wild postcast. So make sure to stick with for all of that as we look to see how the Minnesota Wild do here after picking up a win against Montreal on Tuesday. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On Wild wherever you listen to your podcasts, also on YouTube, and make sure to turn notifications on so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the course of the week. You can find new episodes and game coverage all season long as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.